Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar. This is the CI Tools webinar. My name is Josh Osborne. I'm the product manager for the CI Tools Central Innovation. And this is our weekly webinar where we talk about stuff to do with the tools. So far this year we have started going through all of the tools using ArchiCAD 28 so that we have covered off all of the tools in that version. So if you haven't seen any of these before, these will be showing you them in the current version. If you have seen them before, there may be one or two things that you might pick up that might be useful in them. But this is going to be sort of introductory. This week we're going to be looking at the coverings tool, and we're going to start off with wall coverings. We may get to roof coverings a little bit today, but we're going to start with wall coverings and see how we go anyway. In ArchiCAD 28, the way that the coverings tool works is essentially the same as it was in 27 and to some extent 26 also. So if you are not using the latest version of ArchiCAD, everything that you see today will pretty much apply there. It might just look a little bit different because we're using the 28 interface. Before we start, if you have any questions also, please enter those in the chat wherever you're watching this, and I will stop either midway through or just at the end, have a look and see if there's any questions there, and if there are any that I can answer live, I will do so. If you think of anything after the meeting, after the webinar, or just during the week or something, you can send those questions through to nz.support@centralinnovation.com. That will make its way through to our support team, and if they can help you, they will, and if they need to check with me, they'll forward it on to me. That also applies if you have ideas for things you'd like to see covered in this webinar. Please send those through to the same place. Just say, hey, here's a topic idea for the CI Tools webinar, and that will make its way to me as well. But with that out of the way, let's jump into ArchiCAD and the tools. So as I mentioned, we're working in ArchiCAD 28. Before we jump into coverings, just quickly, if you are getting started just recently in ArchiCAD 28, you'll need to make sure that you have the libraries loaded for the CI tools. So the way that you do this is different depending on if you are using a migrated project or if you're starting a new project in 28. In this case, I have essentially restarted this project in 28. So we are using library packages, and you can see that I've loaded all of the CI Tools library packages in here. So if you are having any trouble getting the tools to work, in particular if you don't have the libraries loaded in the CI coverings, and you try to apply a covering to a wall or a roof or something, it will simply not do anything if the library isn't there. So if you're having that happening, this is why. So make sure you have your library packages loaded. If you're unsure how to do that, we have a Help Center article on our knowledge base that will tell you exactly how to load your libraries depending on what kind of project you're working in. So make sure you have that in place first. But let's get on to the coverings themselves. So first of all, why might you want to use a covering? So looking at our model here, you can see that we have a bunch of walls and roofs. And at the moment we have, for instance, on this roof, we have a texture of a corrugated roof shown here. But as you can see, it's actually completely flat. This is just giving the appearance of a corrugated roof. If we do a render, it's not going to look super amazing. We're also not going to get shadows cast by the corrugation or anything. And so what the coverings tool will be doing is it'll be adding a fully 3D model of that whatever type of covering, for instance corrugate here maybe, to this roof, so that not only will it look better in 3D and in renders, but it means that when we cut sections through, you will see the full detail there. Whereas at the moment, if we go to a section view, for instance this one here, you'll see that our roof is simply a rectangular block in the shape of the roof. I've drawn some details in it, but the roof itself is not showing us much info. So the coverings tool is going to add a whole bunch of extra detail to our section views as well. So that's why we might want to use it. So what we do is we select the elements that we want to put these 3D claddings onto, and then we apply the claddings to them. So I'm going to start with the wall coverings. I'll select some of my walls here. I'm going to grab all of these on the bottom. Actually, I'll start at the other end. We'll grab all of these walls here. I go to CA Tools menu, find Coverings, and then choose Wall Coverings. And that will bring up the picker to allow us to choose the wall coverings. Make sure you choose CA Tools Wall Covering. The only reason you should be using the old one is if you are, you'll already know if you need to be using the old one because you were already using them before and you haven't migrated the objects. That's totally fine, but in our case we are placing brand new coverings, so you should pretty much always use the new covering object for that, which is just called CA Tools Wall Covering. And once we select that, the first thing we see is the option to control what kind of cladding we have. So you can see at the moment we have it set to weatherboard. There's a variety of cladding types selected here. I'm not going to change this for now. I just want to show you what the actual cladding looks like, and then we'll jump back into the settings. So all we need to check for is, so we've got a cladding selected here. This is going on to a layer Des wall coverings, which is fine. And we're on the ground floor, so that's all set. We'll hit OK. And the next thing that happens is it draws a little line here to let us choose what side of the wall it's going to place on. Now you could put your coverings on the interiors of your wall. The coverings tool is primarily designed for exteriors because it does weatherboards and bricks and blocks and that sort of thing. But there are certain cases where you might want to use it indoors. For instance, you could use bricks, the brick and block setting to put tiles or something like that. So you can put it on any side of the walls. However, in most cases, it's usually going to be the exterior. So we'll move our little eyeball cursor here to the exterior of the walls and then click. And the tool will go through and add all of those coverings now. So you can see in my floor plan view, we now have an extra piece here, which is the covering, in our case, weatherboards. And you can also see that it's put trims around our openings because that was in the default settings as well. And if I go back to my 3D view, we will see some nice 3D coverings on our building. So we put them on just these walls down at the end here. So you can see now we have some nice looking 3D weatherboards here. And you can see at this angle that the lighting is showing up the way you would expect on actual 3D coverings. On 3D weatherboards, so you can see the shape of them there in profile, and we're also getting shadows cast onto them in a realistic way, and they're also casting shadows on themselves as well, sort of under the lip of each one. So we've got these really nice looking 3D coverings here, and if I jump to my section view, hopefully this is the section that, yep, you can see we now have a whole bunch of additional detail essentially done for free for us. So we have our weatherboards showing in cross section. We also have a sill on this window showing in our cross section as well. So it's just done a bunch of the work for us there, which is really nice. So now that we've got our nice 3D cladding placed on our walls, what we can do is have a look at some of the other options that are available. So one of the most important things about the covering is that it is a live, it's tracing the shape, let's say, of the wall underneath it in real time. So if you make any changes at all to the wall, the covering will follow. So for instance, if I grab this a window here and move it across the wall, the covering will automatically update to take that into account. So you can see it didn't cover over the window or anything like that. So even though the window is inside the wall and doesn't technically touch the covering is taking its shape from the wall underneath. So any changes we make to our walls, those will be reflected immediately in all of our coverings. So you never need to worry about running an update or anything like that. They'll just always be in sync with the walls they're attached to. So you can kind of place them and forget about them to some extent. So let's have a look at some of those other cladding types. So I'll jump back in here. And as you saw before, we have quite a range of them available. I'll turn on a couple of them just so you can see what they look like. So we've got boards and battens here. Let's just select that one and see how those look. So you can see we've got a horizontal board and batten pattern here now. And for each of the types of cladding we select, there's a variety of settings in terms of dimensions for each of those. So with our boards and battens, we have A, which is the value of the air gap. So that's the gap between the cladding and the wall itself. B, in this case, is the thickness of the boards. C is the spacing between each batten, 150 at the moment. D is the thickness of the battens, so that's sitting on top of the boards. And E is the width of the battens that we had there. So you can see all of those shown there. And then finally, we also have a rotation amount here, so we could set this to 90 and have them running vertically instead of horizontally. There we go. And again, because this is all live, this will be coming through to the section cut immediately and all of that sort of thing. So if I jump back over here, you will see that change has come through once the section, I'm not cutting through that actual one that we just modified though, unfortunately. That is right on where we are, I think, at the moment. No, sorry, that's it there. But because they're vertical, you can't see the difference between them anymore, but that has reflected there, and you can see our sill is still showing and that sort of thing. So yeah, so you can go through and choose the type of cladding that you want and make changes to the settings in here to get it to reflect the sort of thing that you want it to. So for instance, if you want bricks and blocks, we can choose those. We can choose how they are stacked. So we've got a couple of different options there. And then we can define the size of the bricks and that sort of thing in here, and it will go ahead and make those. Corrugated metal will let us choose the size of the corrugations. Ribbed metal is similar, so we could use this to do something like a standing seam. We could make the D value here very thin so that we just get a very thin piece, or we can leave it as ribbed and then adjust the base and top height to achieve the shape that we need for those ribs. A couple of different shiplap options here. Those look very similar to the weatherboard settings. You will also see that there's a selector here to choose what the spacing is. So we can have single width where they just repeat all the way down, a repeating sequence, or randomized widths. And if we choose one of those, we can then further define what the set of available options is for those. That's set to random, so I can't do that. Okay, I've done something funny there, but we can define the pattern that it will follow. Shingles, very similar settings to the weatherboards. It's just what you would expect for sizing of shingles and that sort of thing. You can have a double coursing there. Vinyl weatherboards, same as regular weatherboards as well. They just look like vinyl ones. And then further up at the top, we also had, we missed panels as well. So panels will just do a set out of a bunch of panels using the spacing and sizings that you select here. And then generic will just place essentially a rectangular piece over the top, which you could use to represent anything that you like. Maybe it's like some sort of panel lining or something like that. This will allow you to do that, and it just has a thickness here. So we can go through and choose the type of cladding that we want. And then in terms of both appearance and to be able to schedule it and that sort of thing, we can come over to the right here and you can see that we are defining a building material. So we recently, well, almost a year ago now, but last year we updated the tool so that all of the items in it are built using building materials now, rather than just you defining some appearance settings for them. You can pick up a building material, so we can say timber wall, for instance. Whoops, let's click there, timber wall. And that will use that building material for these. So you'll see the materials of timber wall used there. And it also means that if we were to run a schedule to show us all of the amount of timber wall building material we're using, the claddings will be included in that. So we'll get accurate numbers out in our schedules based on that. You can also override the surface if you like by clicking this icon here and then choosing the color that you want to override with. So we can say that even though we're using timber wall, we want to draw, sure, let's go with plywood over top of them. And then there's a further button next to this one with a sort of a sun icon on it. And this will only apply the surface on the parts of the covering that are actually visible. So essentially what we're saying is that if you're using weatherboards, for instance, if we turn on this option, it will put wood plywood on the outside of the weatherboards, but on the inside, underneath So the part that's facing the wall that you don't see, that will retain the building material. And the reason it does this is so that, again, if you want to be able to produce an accurate schedule of the amount of surface area that you have, so if you are applying paint and you want to know how much area is painted, you can use this option here to make sure you only paint the outside of your claddings, and then you will get an accurate area value for your calculation based on the surface that you apply there. So we can do those things there. And if I hit OK, we'll see those changes that we made come through here, and they're still rotated 90 degrees. So it looks a bit ridiculous. Let's get rid of that. Okay, so we've got our weatherboards showing up here again. Now, there's plenty of other things that we can also do with these claddings. So I'm going to jump up to the top part here, which is the configuration setting. So at the moment, all we've looked at is the cladding type of the main area of our wall covering. But there's a couple of different things that we can do here. So most importantly are these 4 buttons here. So we can choose if we want to split the cladding. So at the moment, the cladding is applying to the entire window. However, we have options here to split the cladding at the nominal sill height, split the cladding above openings, split at the, we've got a repeating tooltip there. This one's below openings and this one's above openings. You can see from the icon, this one's at the nominal sill height and this is at the nominal head height. And these numbers down below them define what those 2 values are. So nominal sill height is 900, nominal head is 2200. You can modify those to whatever you need to. Just down here though, and you can see when I click those 2 that our little preview shows the difference is automatically kicked in. If I undo those and go below opening and above opening, you'll see that happening there as well. And you can go with all 4 of them if you really want to have it split. Basically any variation of splits it will allow you to do here. Once we do choose one of these, we can then control that separately to the main cladding. So I've chosen to split underneath my, my openings. And if I click in the settings here, you'll see now that along with main wall cladding, I also have wall cladding below openings. Because this is a separate piece of cladding now, and I can go in here and I can say below the openings it should be brickwork. That looks fine. We'll leave it as that, and it will do those just underneath my openings all across this piece of cladding. The other controls in here, we have some settings about the way that the covering traces the shape of the wall that it is placed on. So at the moment, the top shape of the cladding is going to follow the top shape of the wall, and it's not going to be offset at all. So it's going to match the top height of the wall all the way across the covering. If you wanted to add offset here, maybe you want the covering to shoot up past the top of the wall, or if you want it to drop down below the top of the wall, you can enter a positive or negative offset here to allow it to do either of those. And then we also have some other options. So follow wall up to maximum height essentially does what it sounds like. So we can say you should follow the wall, but if you hit a certain dimension, you should stop there. Flat will just draw at as exactly what value we put in here. So you can see it's ignoring the fact that the wall is that high, and it just draws the covering to that exact height. It will still copy the rest of the shape of the wall, so the openings and stuff will still be there. It just ignores the wall itself for the top, because that's what we're setting there. And then the last one is custom shape. So this will follow the shape of the wall, but it will draw nodes onto our wall covering in 3D so that we can adjust the shape to whatever we want. So if you've got something a little bit tricky going on, maybe it's having trouble dealing with multiple roofs over a wall or something like that, you can use the custom option to achieve whatever you need to there. But I'm going to go back to follow wall. That's what you'll be using in most cases. And then the base settings are very similar. So we've got follow wall, custom shape, and flat. The one that's missing is the follow wall up to certain height, which doesn't make sense at the bottom of the wall. So we don't have anything in there. But again, if you want to have the wall covering drop down below the bottom of the wall, or if you need to kick it up above the bottom of the wall, maybe it's to allow for a slab underneath or something like that, you can do that in here as well using this same offset value. Set that to positive or negative, however much you need to go, and it will do that for you. And then finally, over on the bottom left here, we have these controls called ignore wall geometry near ends. So by default, the wall covering will ignore anything that happens at a certain distance to the end of the covering. In the case of the one we have here, it's within 200 mils of the end. The reason it does this is simply because if you have multiple wall intersections happening at a corner, it can sometimes get a little bit tricky to figure out what miters to wear and that sort of thing. So it will essentially ignore anything strange happening at the ends. If you need to tell it to ignore that, the main reason you might want to do that is because you have a window very close to the corner as well, and you need it to be able to track the size of that window. You can set these down to 0 and it'll turn off the ignoring thing. It might make it a little bit trickier to get your intersections right if you have something that's not just a 45-degree corner, but you can still define that manually. So this will allow you to do that if you have something strange like that happening with your walls. So that's the configuration settings. We looked at the cladding settings. We also have settings for the trims. So we've got wall top trim here, head height trim, sill height trim, and wall base trim. So you can get the covering to do trims on your walls at whatever point you would like to. You can see if I choose that, we see it in the preview there right away. So that's going to apply to the wall tops all the way along this cladding, and we have similar settings to what we had in the cladding itself. And that applies the same way for each of these settings. Also in the main cladding settings, we have some different parts that it can look at as well. So we were looking at the main cladding settings for all of these, but we also have options to control what might happen on external corners. So at the moment nothing happens, but we can tell it to draw something on external corners, and once we make our choice, we can define the settings for those. Same for internal corners, same for wall ends, and same for joints between claddings. So this is when it's split. What should they do at the split point? If I set this to rectangular, you'll see it on this split that we have happening here. So if I go OK, we will see those coins showing at the end here, and underneath our cladding underneath our opening, over here, you'll see that change one is showing there as well. And then, as we mentioned before, we also are seeing some extra trims on our openings, and that is defined here. So this is useful if you have windows and doors placed and you want the trims on them to all be uniform across all of the windows and doors, or maybe the window or door object you have that you're using, doesn't have the type of trims that you want or something like that. This will essentially let you do the trims as part of your wall cladding instead. So you can choose where you want them to go. These are the settings for the offsets for the trim. This is for the head trim, jamb trim, and sill. So you can go through and define some of those. So brick sills are what we have at the moment, as you can see in our 3D view in the background there. And it allows us to define how that works. But there's a couple of different options for type of sill there, and the same for the other areas as well. So if you want to put jamb trims on, we can do that. Let's put a nice color on those so that we can see them easily, and then it will just go around the jambs and draw those on all the way around. So you can do quite a whole lot of different things with those as well. And yeah, as I said, it's very handy for if you have multiple openings in the wall and you want the trims to be consistent across all of them. This will just handle it for you. You don't have to worry about putting trims on the actual window and door units.